You may be seated. We're going to continue with a teaching from a midrash that I found. Welcome. So the word Haggadah, as you may know, means, what does it mean? Haggadah? The Hagid. Good, we're starting from the beginning. Good, the word Lahagid means to tell. So a Haggadah is a telling. So whose story do we tell on Passover? Obvious answer would be our people's story. Might also think our own story. Both would be correct. We tell our people's story and our own story. But perhaps it's tonight to tell another story. And that would be to tell God's story. Let me show you in this midrash what I'm referring to. This is a midrash from Devarim Rabbah. Devarim Rabbah is a midrash that actually was organized according to the triennial Torah reading, sort of like what we do here. Organized according to the cycle in Eretz Yisrael. So it's a very old midrash, probably dating from between 800 and 900 CE, maybe a tiny bit later, but fairly old midrash. This is from a manuscript that was found in Great Britain and housed at Oxford. And published by the late great Shaul Lieber. And this midrash that we're going to read together explains how Jewish boys survived Pharaoh's decree of male infanticide. After all, how were their children able to come out of Egypt if all the male boys had actually been killed? How did any besides Moses? We know how Moses survived. We know that the women, there was a group of women who raised them. The Pharaoh's daughter, in this very first great interfaith gathering of Miriam and Pharaoh's daughter and Yocheved, Moses' mom, and Pharaoh's handmaidens and slaves. This community of women, Israelite women and Egyptian women, raised Moses. But how did any other male survive? Jewish women, as we heard from Mayan, did not like Amram's decree that it's too dangerous to give birth. Miriam called Amram out and said, "You actually are worse than Pharaoh. We want to give birth. We need to take our chances. This enterprise of the Jewish people with God is too important just to drop of a tyrant." So they would, instead of condemning their sons to death, they ventured into the wilderness to give birth. The midrash depicts it among apple trees. I'm not sure really were apple trees in Egypt, but that is how the midrash of Eastern Europe depicts it. And away from, out in the apple orchards, away from Egyptian oversight. But after giving birth, the mothers knew they could not bring back the boys home, right? Because the infant boys would be taken and murdered. So they turned to God and declared, "I have done my part. Now it's time for you to do." And according to the Midrash, that's exactly what God did. So let's read the first part of this Midrash. Amar Rabbi Hiya Hagadol, Yishtabach Shemo Hu Bichvodo Haya Oseh Lahem Kach. Vayu Atinokot Gedelim Basadek Tzmeikim. Vayu Mikadlim Benifnasim Ba'adarim B'Beitam. Hu Shechez Hel Omer Revavak Yitzemach Hasadeh Netaticha. May the name of the Holy One of Blessing be praised, as God in full glory did this for them. The infants grew up in the field like grass, and after they grew up, they returned in flocks to their home. This is as Ezekiel prophesied, a myriad like grass of the field I ensured for you. So, what is this portrait of God? This is God who's clearly acting as a surrogate mother to the Jewish people's abandoned male babies. That's quite a very different God than the God we encounter in Exodus. In Exodus, we often read that God is an Ish Milchama, a warrior fighting to free the people. But in this midrash, God is a mother figure caring for her. In Exodus, God cares for his children by bringing punishment and death to others. But the God of this midrash cares for her children the way we would imagine a good mother doing, by nursing them, washing them, cleaning them, tending them, and cherishing. Eventually, when the danger was past, God brings the children home. How do we know this? Now we go to the second part of the midrash. Please follow with me. How would these infants born in the apple orchards know which homes to go to and which parents they should return to? Ella HaKadosh Baruch Hu nichnas imahem vayamar el kol achad v'achad beit aviv va'omer lo ra lavicha ploni ulamicha plonit omer lahem ena tazechu ra k'sheyaladet oti de ploni v'yom ploni mikodem chamisha chodeshim. Rather, the Holy One of Blessing, God personally accompanied each and every child, showing them every single one their parents' homes, encouraging them, call out your father whose name is so-and-so, call out your mother whose name is so-and-so. And each child would then say to their mother, well, don't you remember when you gave birth to me in such a field and on such a day months ago? God's kindness to the lost children of Egypt is not limited to the care God extended to them while their parents cannot care for them. Not only did God clean them and wash them and tend to them and cherish them, God's kindness extends to ensure that the children know who they are, teaching them their parents' names, the circumstances of their birth, and where they came from. In this midrash, God redeems the Jewish people by making sure that our children know their parents' names and their parents' stories. The midrash concludes with another final reunion between God and these very children. Now we go to the final part of the midrash. Shabbat HaYam v'ra'u otan hayu mar'in le'imotam be'etzva va'omer lahem ze eli va'anvehu ze eli va'anvehu zehu shegidelti. Arrived at the Red Sea years later, and they saw God. They pointed God out to their mothers with their finger, exclaiming, "This is my God whom I will exalt. That's the God who raised me as a single mother when you and Dad could not do so. This is my God I will exalt." Wow. The adults who experience miracle after miracle after miracle do not recognize God at all. It is the children God tended to who recognize God as the greatest miracle the Jewish people have ever experienced. Not God as an Ish Milchama, the great warrior who saves people from them, but God, the one who raised them and returned them to their home. We hope, especially in light of all that we've been seeing in Ukraine, that every family should get to care for their own children, to feed them and to raise them personally. This is one of freedom's immeasurable gifts. Raise our children ourselves. We have the merit to do for them what God did for our children. Press them, hold them close, tend to them, love them. Care is the gift of freedom. It is a gift not all of our ancestors had, and a gift denied to many today. We think of the millions of children who are human trafficked, and many as a result of the Russian. Yet in Egypt, at least, the side effect of the harrowing upbringing of those slave children was growing up with God herself. When they grew up, they of course recognized God immediately. Our children, on the other hand, not grow up recognizing God so easily. One meaning I take away from this midrash is that today parents have a responsibility. Just as God told our children stories when we were absent, we must tell our children and our grandchildren God's story. That's what happens on Seder night. On Seder night, we step into God's role and tell our children stories of God, who often feels absent. Thus, we hope to ensure that when they encounter God in the world, our children and grandchildren will recognize him. Just as God taught our children our names, stories when we were unable to, on Seder night, we tell our children and grandchildren about God. This is God's name, we say, and this is God's glory. God gave birth to us long ago in a land called Egypt. And this is how you will recognize God when you meet him. He is the one who frees slaves and loves the brokenhearted. He is the one who cares for those no one else can care for. He is the one who brings lost children. May we continue to encounter this God of radical caring and radical compassion. May we continue to recognize God in such acts of redemption that occur every day through the ordinary efforts of ordinary people like us. Raise our children, our grandchildren. May we continue to tell God's story, Pesach after Pesach, year after year, month after month,